Yo, so if you clicked on this video, that means you belong to the tribe. So make it official and hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of this content. I want to say welcome to the channel. My name is Cedric, but you can call me Ceddy Ced, and this is Reviews from the Six. So today we'll be reviewing the biography of Booker T on A&E. Now, they've been doing a couple of them. I watched the Stone Cold, I watched the Macho Man, enjoyed both of them. I felt like these series, or not series, I guess. Yeah, it is a series in a way, but with these biographies, I feel like it gives you a look into the personal life of the athlete instead of just the career of the athlete, to where, you know, we can watch the WWE network and watch their specials, and it's not really a documentary on the person, but more so of a documentary on the athlete, right? The character itself and the difficulties of the character. Here it was more so family based, starting from day one, so forth. Even though a lot of the wrestlers and the talents we already know the backstories on, it's just kind of cool to see the wrestlers sit down and give their history and their life story. So to begin with Booker T, he's one of the youngest of three children. Small town Texas guy. They didn't have a lot of money growing up. There was a lot of kids in a household. A tragedy happened to where both his parents died and they were forced to raise each other. However, the oldest kind of went on and did their own thing, and then the last three children were left to survive on their own together. So it got to the point where they were living in a condemned home, right? I mean, the home had no electricity, it had no water, it had no gas, they didn't have any food. I mean, it was getting bad to the point where one of the sisters were like, you know what, we'll go ahead and take them in. So the sister took them in, and of course, it's not their mother, right? So they're gonna do what rambunctious children do or teenagers do, and that's rebel. And that's exactly what Booker did. So Booker was hanging out with a group of friends, and they worked at a convenience store or a fast food restaurant. I want to say it was a fast food restaurant, but I don't want to say it was a Wendy's. I believe he said it was a Wendy's. Long story short, they weren't paying enough. Him and two of his buddies were like, well, how can we get more money? And they jokingly said, well, if we rob this place, we would have more money. And Lord and behold, they robbed the place, so they got away with it. And Booker said, you know, since they got away with it, they were like, hey, can we do it again? So they did it again, and they were like, hey, maybe we can do this again. And on that third time, they were caught and they were arrested. So I believe Booker T did time in prison as a teenager, somewhere along the lines of 8 to 10 years, 7 to 10 years, somewhere around there. They really didn't say how many years he got, but I do remember him in another interview saying how many years he received. So he gets out, and of course he didn't know what to do. Fresh out of prison, young man, what's going on? Well, his older brother, Stevie Ray, which real name is Lash, he was getting into the wrestling business, and Booker always wanted to be like his older brother or his bigger brother. So Booker went along with the ride. Booker actually became a character called G.I. Bro. And you know what? I've always heard him mention this character, and even in his new wrestling organization, because he owns ones now, you can see him going back to that character with the ring gear and everything. So me seeing that character and not knowing exactly how he was as that character intrigued me. So seeing this aspect of it was pretty cool, because seeing G.I. Bro, you saw a lot of the Booker T we see today, and you just knew he was going to be a star by the way he looked, by the way he sound, and just his presence on camera. It was like, wow, who is this guy, right? So after that, him and his brother decided to become a tag team, and they became a tag team by the name of the Ebony Experience. He said that they got the name from a former wrestler. I believe his name was Ebony something, and he wore a mask, so they never got to see who he was. I want to say Ebony Mystery, something like that. I can't really remember. So they were like, okay, let's do something like that. So they became the Ebony Experience, and in their first match, they were experiencing all type of racism. They said all type of racism. I mean, people were calling them all type of names, throwing stuff at them, spitting on them. I mean, doing the whole nine. And you got to remember, this is in Texas, right? This is in Texas, and not only Texas, but the Sportatorium, which is notorious for racism and all type of violent acts going on there because of a wrestling event or a wrestling match. So they said they didn't know what to do, but the whole thing turned around when they saw Booker hit the spinner Rooney. Yes, the spinner Rooney. That changed everything. The crowd was on their side. The crowd was yelling, "Get him, Booker T! End him, Booker, Booker, Booker!" You know, I mean, they totally changed that crowd. Now the crowd is on their side, seeing the cool things that these two men can do. I mean, they look the part, they act the part, and at this point, they weren't total badasses, but you can look at them and tell these dudes were nothing to play with, right? They were badasses from the mean streets. Right after that, they start wrestling in other organizations, and you know, they start picking up momentum. It got to the point where the wrestling organization they were a part of started to fizzle out. It started to go down, but they were still putting on matches. They finally received a call from Psycho Sid saying that the WCW had interest in them. So to hear Psycho Sid actually shouted him out and was paying attention to him was pretty cool, because I love Psycho Sid, Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, whatever you know him as. I love all forms of Sid. Yes, not the best in-ring worker, but a great talent. Anyways, so they get the call to WCW. Now, they get to WCW and they really don't know what gimmick they wanted to be, but they said at that time people were using heat and everything. So they were like, well, we can't be Texas Heat. What if we call each other Harlem Heat? And it kind of stuck. And it does. When you look at those guys, it's like, okay, I can see these dudes being from Harlem. It's weird because even though they're from the South, they really don't seem Southern, you know? They just seem like total badasses from any part of the world. But the Harlem Heat worked. Now, they had no idea what they were going to do as far as attire, because before, you know, it was simple, colorful, or just tights, you know? So they were like, well, what do we do where we can incorporate Harlem and some heat? So now, this is the cool part. This is the part that when I saw it, I was like, that's pretty dope, because I had no idea where the inspiration came from. However, the inspiration behind their outfits came from Brooks and Dunn. The flames on the shirt, a country shirt. These guys, now you got to remember, they're from the South, right? So they're probably into country and that type of music. But when they showed me the picture of the country star and the flame shirt, I laughed because I would have never drawn the correlation, you know? But you could actually see it. Yes, they're dressed as cowboys, as Western singers, you know, or in attires. So they said they got two of those shirts. They cut it, rolled it up, and then for the hats, you know, they just cut off the sleeves and put it on. And it was so funny because as he describing the story, I'm laughing like there's no way this is gonna work, right? Or there's no way that was the inspiration. And then all of a sudden they come out and you see it and you're like, oh crap, these dudes are WCW talents, and all they did was cut up a couple shirts that they saw Brooks and Dunn wear. Like, that was pretty neat, right? And they pretty much go on about how, you know, not really about their success. Like, they didn't go through a timeline of the success in WCW or the experiences in WCW, which is more so of the formation of Harlem Heat in WCW and the transitions they were going through. So it gets to a point where, and I didn't know this either, you know, sticking on the racism in the business, right? He said, but coming up in the business, he was even told by a former wrestler that, this is Booker T now, that he has all the talent in the world, but he's going to come across all type of obstacles. And Booker T says he looks back and understands that he was telling them that this business is racist, and they overcame all that, you know. Now we get to Sturgis, South or North Dakota, one of the Dakotas. So they get there, and they said they were the only black people there, from the roster to the audience. They were the only black people there. And you know, these are hardcore bikers in Dakota. And he was told by one of the Steiners the Harlem Heat was told by one of the Steiners, hey, don't go out there talking crap to this crowd, because you got to remember, Harlem Heat was so used to being antagonized for being black that they played along with it, that they would step out the ring and actually talk crap back to the rednecks and the hicks and the racists, all this and that, get them all riled up, and that would get them into the match. So Harlem Heat, Stevie Ray was like, nah, I ain't listening to none of that. We're gonna go out here and do what we do, what made us us. And that's exactly what they did. They went out there and now I want to go back and watch the match, but these dudes, Harlem Heat, Booker T, and Stevie Ray, was just going at it with the audience, man. You can tell they weren't holding back, and it literally felt like Booker and Stevie Ray was going to run into the crowd and whoop everybody. And when you look at their size, you can see like, oh my God, these are intimidated black men. Like, it's going to take all of us to take them down. Oh man, that would have been a fight. So as the fight goes on, or as the match goes on, all the bikers started to rev their engines. Vroom, 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 which is pretty cool, because I didn't know that's the reason why. I thought it was part of the show. But really, it was because Stevie Ray and Booker T was just embarrassing them the whole night, and the bikers were saying, we're going to get you after this. Now, I guess there were some Hells Angels in the crowd, and Stevie Ray was like, bro, where I grew up, I don't know about no Hells Angels. I don't give a damn about no Hells Angels. So we not, right? So anyways, long story short, they retained their titles. They didn't get attacked or anything like that, but they put on a hell of a show. To get that type of reaction, that was probably the best reaction on the card all night. Eventually, we get to the point where Booker becomes a solo wrestler. And, at that time, they were propositioning Booker. And Stevie was just like, you know what, brother, go ahead and do you. So Booker T said, it was a difficult transition going into a solo wrestler, but he did it anyways, right? So they really didn't document, his U.S. title wins and things like that. They pretty much jumped to the point where Hogan and Jarrett does the lay down match, where Booker finally becomes champion, right? So long story short, Hulk Hogan has creative control in his contract. This night, he goes out there and he says, you know what? I'm beating Jeff Jarrett for the title. 1, 2, 3. Take it up yours, Vince Russo. And Russo didn't like it. Jarrett goes in the ring. He lays down. They don't have a match. Hogan puts his boot on him, covers him. 1, 2, 3. Gets on the mic, tells him this business or this company's in the trash because of crap like this. So on, so on. Mic drop. Leaves with the belt, right? We all know that. It's history after that, right? So Russo comes out, says, you know what? We're focusing on the younger talent and newer blood. I have a match between Booker T, Jeff Jarrett for the World Heavyweight Championship tonight. Boom. Booker goes out there and he wins it. Booker T becomes, I want to say he's the second black heavyweight champion, right? Because Ron Simmons would be the first one in WCW. So Booker T would be the second one. Wins the title, right? Goes on a great run, y'all. And he's just talking about how he's away from home, but he can see that the business is going down. And then they jump into the point where Vince buys his competition. Vince buys WCW. So all the guys in the back, this is Booker T's words, are losing their minds, right? Hey, this is the end of our career. We don't know what we're going to do. So forth, so forth. They get to the end of the match, or not the end of the match, I'm sorry, but to the end of the show where they're actually closing the show. It's over with, it's done, capiche. So they set up Scott Steiner versus Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship. And at this point, Booker T is already the U.S. Heavyweight Championship. So Booker T goes out there, he beats Scott Steiner for the World Heavyweight Championship, making him the unified champion of WCW before it closed. So he ended the show with being the WCW heavyweight champion and the United States heavyweight championship. Kudos to Booker, especially through everything he's been through. Kudos, brother. And shout out to WCW. Now, here's the interesting point that I never knew. So we all knew that a lot of these talents had guaranteed contracts, so they didn't have to wrestle. They got to sit at home, such like Sting, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hogan. There's quite a few of them, right? Booker T was one of them. I didn't know that. But instead of sitting on the sideline, Booker T said, I want to stay in the game. So with that guaranteed contract, he still worked. He still wrestled. And that's where we saw him in the WWE finally. And of course, he came out, attacked Stone Cold, had the feud with Stone Cold. Stone Cold said that it's one of the greatest workers he's been in. Booker T goes to the point where he says, people forget the drama and the theatrical side of wrestling. And that's the same thing Stone Cold said too. He said, working with Booker, you understand the theatrics and the drama of this game. And the cool part was, when I sat there and thought about it, and you look at Booker, Booker is very theatrical. Booker is very drama filled. I mean, Booker comes out to the ring like, does his interests and things like that. I mean, it's very trauma. Or when he gets hit, he's just like, like he just took a ton of bricks to the face. Like he's very animated, you know. And I never realized that. And they go into the infamous scene of them being in the grocery store, beating the crap out of each other, and the infamous line, price check on a jackass. You know, they went over that. They go through that feud. Now, one of the things that disappointed me was that they didn't talk about the Triple H feud. I wanted them to go into detail about that. I wanted to know what was Booker T's feelings on that, because Triple H as a heel at that time was saying heelish stuff. And to me, it was borderline racist. So for example, you know, I have braids. Booker had braids at the time. And I believe Triple H said that his hair was nappy. I mean, he said a whole bunch of other things too, like a man like Booker would never have the opportunity that he had if WCW wasn't going out of business. Booker wasn't on his level, so on, so on. I mean, he said a lot of mess, and I kind of wanted to see Booker address that and see what he said. And spoiler alert, Triple H goes out and beats Booker T at WrestleMania. And Booker T was the hottest he had ever been in his career, in my opinion. And a lot of people think Booker T should have won that match, but he didn't. Triple H didn't put him over. So I just kind of wanted to see his thoughts and his opinion on that. Like, was he supposed to go over? Did he feel like he should have gone over? So on, so on. Anyways, so right after they get done talking about that, they get into the King Booker, right? How he wins King of the Ring, and he's probably one of the most notable runs as King of the Ring, right? I mean, because when he went into the whole King Booker role, I mean, who didn't want to be King Booker? I mean, the thumbs up. He had Shamel on his side, his wife, which they also discussed how they wanted to bring her back to do work with him, and you know, because they met, and she was one of the Nitro girls, and she fell in love with him because he seems like a guy that listens to Frank Sinatra and is laid back, but he really listens to Tupac and grew up in the streets. So forth, so forth. So they talk about how Shamel comes back and he becomes the queen, or she becomes the queen. It was an easy transition because he calls her a queen at home. Easy transition. But we all wanted to be that King Booker with the crown, sitting on a throne, with the pyro coming up, with the thumb up in the air, with the title like this, and just looking out to the crowd like I'm royal. And then with the terrible British accent, right? We all wanted to do that, you know? I mean, there was things where Booker would come out and he would do a couple stances, you know, and I would be like, yo, that was pretty hilarious, you know, or he would come out and do the twirl of his robe, you know, that was pretty dope. But the way he dressed, the way he carried himself, it was probably one of Booker's best runs. Now, this wasn't in the documentary, but I believe he beat Rey Mysterio for a heavyweight championship. Chavo interfered, hit Rey with the chair, a vicious chair shot at that. Getting off topic. But anyways, they talked about how he just enjoyed that run, man, and that was one of his greatest experiences. One of the things that made me laugh was they talked about when he would get out of character, right? He would get straight hood, he was straight ghetto, where Teddy Long would tell him something he didn't like, or someone else wouldn't tell him, or would tell him something he didn't like, and he would just go get him, just, oh hell no, they tripping, oh. When he was just talking like he was from Britain or something like that was pretty good, man. But then they go into, you know, the kids, his family life and stuff, and Shamel is just like, he's the same at home as he is on the road, everywhere, and everyone says that. They said that he's just him, you know, you never get a different Booker. And he just loves life. And like Booker was saying, he lost so much so early. So his aspect on life is totally different than everyone else's. He lost his mom early. He was the youngest. He grew up in poverty. I mean, so his aspect on everything was that everything is short-lived. Nothing is long-term. So that's where he gets the best out of everything he does and gives his best in everything he does. But I kind of want to end it on that because that's how I want to remember Booker. Booker is a man that overcame all these obstacles from, his parents dying to growing up in poverty to being taken in by his other siblings, from going to prison, robbery, street gangs, to experiencing racism in the wrestling business, I mean, and to get to where he's at now, I mean, Hall of Famer as a Harlem Heat, Hall of Famer for being Booker T. It gets no better than that, man. That is outstanding. So that's how I want to end it. I just want to thank you for clicking and joining me today in this review of the Booker T biography that's on A&E. Now, I just want you to do a couple of things if you can for your boy. Make sure you subscribe. I want you to be part of the tribe. Also, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this documentary, and also let me know what you think about this content. I would greatly appreciate that. Like I said, I love interacting with all you guys. Make sure you hit the big thumbs up, the like button, so the algorithm can promote our content as well. Make sure you share this to any and all social media platforms. I would greatly appreciate that, especially wrestling forums. But with that being said, my name is Seti Said. Peace and blessings. Y'all didn't think I was gonna leave this out, did you? Of course I wasn't. However, because of the sensitivity, I couldn't really speak on it. But they spoke on this, and he said it was just nerves, that he doesn't use the word often. However, it was a word used amongst his community frequently. So great job, Booker. Still support you, brother.